Ladies and gentlemen, I've always found it funny how humans, we're obsessed with paperwork. Like to do anything, rent an apartment, get a job, even adopt a puppy. Someone wants to see your background. Oh, sir, we noticed in 2011 you missed a gym membership payment, so we don't think you're qualified to walk this beagle. Excuse me? You're telling me I can't be trusted with a dog because 14 years ago I bounced a Planet Fitness payment? What's next? FBI clearance to buy a goldfish? We love background checks. You know who doesn't? God. Yeah, God doesn't need to go to LinkedIn to see your qualifications. He's not sitting up there like, okay, let's see. Moses, killed a man. Oof, not ideal. David, adultery, cover-up, murder, geesh. Paul was literally hunting Christians. But let's still use him to write most of the New Testament. Imagine that hiring process. You wouldn't even get past HR. That's because God doesn't do background checks. He does heart checks. And that changes the whole game. Because if it were based on background checks, some of the greatest people in history wouldn't even make it past security. Now, I get it. In life, people want a clean past. You meet someone, you like them, you go on a date, and somewhere between the dessert and the awkward silence, they go, so tell me about your past. And that's when the panic sets in. Like you're on an episode of Criminal Minds and you've got to explain why you didn't talk to your father from 2008 to 2013 and how you used to sell Herbalife. But if you think about it, God already knows the past. You can't surprise him. You think God is sitting there going, wait, you lied about how many people you slept with? Oh, wow, I didn't see that coming. Gabriel canceled the blessing. She didn't tell the truth about Jamal in 2017. Nah. God's not petty like us. We're the petty ones. We hold people hostage to their worst moment like it's their entire resume. Humans love to say, I remember what you did. God says, I remember what I put in you. You ever notice how people will remind you of your failures more than your growth? Like you could have gone to therapy, gotten healed, started a non-profit, and someone will still bring up that one time you got drunk and cried during Frozen. Remember when you were singing Let It Go and throwing Doritos at the TV? Yeah, Carol, but I also opened a school in Uganda last year. Can we focus on that? The thing is, heart checks go deeper than performance. Heart checks see the intention, the hunger, the struggle. They don't ignore the pain, they understand it. See, God knows your brokenness and still calls you beautiful. He knows the mess and still sees the mission. Some of the most powerful people in the Bible and in life were walking contradictions. Peter walked on water and then drowned in doubt. That's like being the first person to invent the iPhone and then accidentally dropping it in the toilet. He was bold one minute and denying Jesus the next. But Jesus still said, on this rock, I will build my church. See what I'm saying? Now try explaining that to a modern recruiter. Hey, I've got a guy I want to recommend for leadership. Oh, great. What's his track record? Well, he once denied his boss 3 times in one night. Okay. So we're looking at HR violations, dishonesty, and possibly identity fraud. But God sees the heart. He's like, I see loyalty under fear. I see courage buried in guilt. I see destiny trying to break through shame. Look, we've all done stuff we regret. Don't lie. Some of you still have burner accounts from your toxic era. Some of you were out here in your soft girl summer last year. Not soft at all, just reckless with brunch money and feelings. And yet somehow grace still caught you. Somehow love still found you. Somehow your phone kept ringing with opportunity, even after you ghosted responsibility. Why? Because your heart never stopped beating purpose, even when you were lost, confused, sabotaging your own blessings. There was something deeper God was tracking. Not your rap sheet, your real self. You know what else I've realized? Humans are like banks. We assess creditworthiness based on history. Oh, you missed a few payments? Sorry, we can't trust you with more. But God is like, he missed some payments? Great. Now you know how to manage mercy. He doesn't disqualify you for being broke in spirit. He invests in you. We don't always invest in people like that. We judge hard. We scroll through Instagram like we're divine auditors. Nope. Messy. Thirst trap. Red flag. Oh, look. She went to Bali and found herself again. But we don't know people's hearts. We know their filters. It's not discernment. That's gossip with an algorithm. What if we started checking hearts instead of histories? What if we stopped demanding that people be perfect before they're accepted? Because that's not how we got here. You think you got your blessings because you were flawless? No, you got them because somewhere along the line, your heart said, I want better, and God said, I see that. You ever have a moment where you were trying to act like you had it together, but deep down you were crying for help? Yeah, that's the moment God moves, not when you're performing, but when you're praying in silence. When you're driving and tears are mixing with your Spotify playlist. And you're like, I don't know what I'm doing with my life. And God's like, perfect. Now I can do something with your life. We don't need more resumes. We need more revelation. We don't need to flex our LinkedIn endorsements. We need to let people see our scars. Because it's the scars that prove we fought. It's the healed wounds that prove we lived. Jesus didn't come back from the dead hiding his scars. He showed them, and yet he was still resurrected, still glorified, still worthy. Some of y'all are trying to hide your past like it's an STD, but your past isn't a punishment. It's proof that grace worked. It's your before picture to your after calling. You think God's ashamed of your story? Nah. He's building someone else's hope with it. And listen, let's talk about shame. That whisper that says you're not good enough, you'll never change. People knew what you did. First of all, people are nosy, they always know. Second of all, that voice is not from God. God convicts, but he never condemns. Conviction says, you're better than this. Condemnation says, you'll never be better. One comes from love. The other comes from fear. And I don't know about you, but I'm tired of fear running people's lives. We're afraid of being found out, afraid of being judged, afraid of not being enough. And so we shrink, we play small, we sanitize our testimonies. We say, God delivered me, but we don't say from what. Because we think if people knew, they'd reject us. Truth is, if God already knows and still chose you, what makes you think their opinion matters? You could have a past that reads like a crime documentary, and God would still say, yep, I'll use her. You could be the guy who blew every shot, fumbled every opportunity, and God would say, watch me restore it all. And maybe that's the point. God doesn't choose us despite our past. He chooses us through it. Your past is the context, not the conclusion. It's the chapter, not the whole book. Some of you are trying to edit your story before the testimony is even done. Relax. Let God finish the sentence. Because the truth is, the most dangerous thing about your past is not the pain. It's the silence. It's pretending like nothing happened, like you were born ready. No, friend, you were broken into readiness. You were humbled into obedience. You were crushed into purpose. And if God allowed the crushing, it's only because he saw the oil in you. So stop letting your past disqualify your future. Stop letting people's opinions write your identity. And for the love of God, and I mean that literally, stop acting like you've got to earn your way into grace. Grace was prepaid. There was no receipt because you're not getting a refund on redemption. You can't return the mercy you didn't ask for. All you can do is receive it and let it change you. So next time someone tries to dig into your background, just smile, tell them, oh, that was the trailer. Wait till you see the full movie. Because your story isn't over. You're still being written. And God's not checking your past to qualify you for the present. He's checking your heart to launch you into the future. Now, what's your heart saying? We live in a world obsessed with records. School records, job records, criminal records, credit records, you name it. It's like before anyone believes in you, they want proof that you've never made a mistake, that you've always been the ideal version of yourself. But God doesn't work like that. He's not sifting through your background trying to find reasons to reject you. He's not scrolling through your timeline like, on May 6, 2012, you cursed someone out at Starbucks, disqualified. No. God looks at something deeper, something more honest than any paper trail. He looks at your heart. When humans do background checks, they're looking for patterns. They want to know if your past behavior can predict your future actions. But God already knows your future. He doesn't need patterns. He knows the whole picture. He doesn't need a checklist of your moral performance. He already sees the fullness of who you are. Your weakness, your strength, your struggle, your fight, and most importantly, your desire. That's what the heart reveals. Not perfection, but desire. Do you want to be better? Do you want to love? Do you want to grow? Do you care? That's what God is watching. That's what moves him. See, background checks measure where you've been. Heart checks measure where you're headed. And that's why God's not impressed by your resume. You could have all the right credentials, say all the right things, do all the churchy moves, memorize all the verses, and still have a heart full of pride, envy, and hate. And on the flip side, you could be someone with a messy, complicated, scandalous history, but have a heart that says, God, I want to do better. And guess who God chooses? Not the one who looks holy, the one whose heart is surrendered. Let's take David. This man had issues, real issues, slept with another man's wife, got her pregnant, then set her husband up to be killed in battle. And still, God called him a man after my own heart. How does that make sense? It makes sense when you realize God wasn't saying David was perfect. He was saying David's heart was honest. When David messed up, he didn't cover it with lies and pride. He came to God broken. He repented. He humbled himself. And that posture, that openness, that's what moved God. Because the heart doesn't hide, it reveals. That's why your history can't cancel your destiny. Because God isn't digging through your past trying to find disqualifiers. He's looking at your heart asking, can I use this? Can I work through this? And the answer, if your heart is surrendered, is always yes. We often think our past is something we have to hide, bury, or somehow outrun, like it's a shadow we hope no one sees, especially not God. But what if the very things we're trying to erase are the things God intends to use? What if the mistakes, the failures, the heartbreaks, the dumb decisions, the addictions, the detours, what if all of that is not proof of our disqualification, but the raw material God uses to prepare us for what's next? The world says your past defines you. If you messed up, that's who you are. Labels get attached: liar, failure, addict, untrustworthy, broken. People see your worst day and act like it's your full identity. But God doesn't do that. He sees your past, yes. He knows every part of it, but he doesn't hold it against you. He uses it, not as punishment, but as preparation. That's why so many of the people God used powerfully had stories that wouldn't even make it past an interview panel today. Take Moses. This man literally killed someone, murdered an Egyptian, ran into the wilderness, became a fugitive. That would disqualify him from just about any leadership role in today's world. But God called him to deliver an entire nation. Why? Because in that wilderness, Moses was learning humility. He was being broken down, not to be discarded, but to be rebuilt. The same fire that burned his anger in Egypt was redirected to ignite purpose at the burning bush. God didn't avoid Moses' past. He transformed it into a platform. And it's not just Moses. Think about Paul. Before he was the Apostle Paul, he was Saul, a man who persecuted Christians, who approved of violence, who was a threat to the very movement he would later lead. That's like someone being a hacker one day and the head of cybersecurity the next. Makes no sense, right? But in God's kingdom, redemption isn't about logic. It's about transformation. Saul's past wasn't erased. It was redeemed. His knowledge of the law, his passion, even his stubbornness, all of it got repurposed for the gospel. We don't like that, though. We want the clean version. We want the shiny testimony. We want to fast forward to the part where we're healed and whole and successful. But God often moves in the mess. That's where he does his best work. He doesn't wait for you to be perfect. He steps into the middle of your brokenness and begins to shape it into strength. You ever notice how people who've been through the most often have the deepest compassion? That's not a coincidence. That's because pain teaches you what comfort can't. Falling and getting back up builds more wisdom than never falling at all. Your past isn't just something to recover from. It's something to learn from, grow through, and eventually teach others with. That's why it's part of your preparation. You may think that what happened disqualifies you, but what if it qualifies you more than you realize? What if the storm you survived made you the anchor someone else needs? What if your detour gave you a map for someone else's journey? What if your breakdown became someone else's breakthrough because you were willing to be honest about it? That's how God works. He turns shame into testimony. He turns regret into wisdom. He turns pain into power, not by ignoring your past, but by redeeming it. He takes what you thought would bury you and uses it to build you. And once you've been built like that, no one can take it away. Not because you're perfect, but because you're prepared. We live in a world that rewards image, a world where performance is everything. Say the right thing, wear the right thing, smile at the right time, and people applaud. You could be falling apart behind the scenes, but as long as the front stage looks good, nobody asks questions. That's how society works. We judge by what we can see. But God doesn't play that game. He's not impressed by performances. He doesn't care how well you can quote scripture if your heart is cold. He's not moved by your ability to sing the loudest in church if your character is silent in private. God values what's real, what's hidden, what's authentic. It's easy to learn the language of religion, to say all the right things, blessed and highly favored. God is good all the time. I'm walking in my season. You can be fluent in church culture and still be bankrupt in soul. You can perform holiness and still feel distant from God, because performance doesn't equal intimacy. Just because you know how to act saved doesn't mean you've surrendered your heart. God doesn't care how good the acting is. He's looking at the behind the scenes footage. He wants to know what your heart looks like when no one's clapping. You see, the problem with performing is that it's exhausting. You start curating your life like it's a brand. You're constantly editing yourself for approval, hoping people will like the version of you you've packaged. But eventually, the real you starts leaking out because you can't fake what your heart never earned. And the truth is, God doesn't need your filter. He wants your truth. He wants the unedited, unfiltered, unfinished version of you, because that's the one he can actually work with. We're so quick to disqualify people based on behavior, but we rarely ask what's going on in their heart. Sometimes what looks like rebellion on the outside is really just a heart that's hurting. Sometimes someone acting out is really just someone crying out. And while people judge the behavior, God hears the deeper story. He sees the pain that triggered the action. He knows the layers. He's not shocked by the mess. He leans into it. Look at the Pharisees. These were the religious leaders. They knew the law. They looked holy. They prayed in public. They fasted. They tithed. They followed the rules. But Jesus called them whitewashed tombs. Clean on the outside, but dead on the inside. That's how dangerous performance can be. It can fool everyone but God. Because while people are applauding your highlight reel, God is sitting with your blooper reel. And that's the footage he's working with. Then look at the woman at the well. No resume, no platform, 5 ex-husbands, living with a man who wasn't her husband. And yet Jesus reveals himself to her, not as a judge, but as living water. He sees her heart, sees her thirst, and chooses her to carry a message to an entire town. Not because she looked the part, but because she was honest. Broken, yes, but honest. That's what God values. Honest, not performance. He wants the real you, not the version you think will impress him. He wants relationship, not routine. And while people may only see the image you project, God sees the posture of your heart. He knows if you're hungry. He knows if you're trying. He knows when you're barely holding it together but still showing up. That's what touches him. Not your polish, but your pursuit. You can impress people with your performance, but you'll only connect with God through your authenticity. He's never asked you to be flawless, just to be real. Because it's your honesty, not your image, that makes room for transformation. Grace is one of those things that doesn't make sense to the human brain, like at all. We're taught from day one that if you want something, you have to earn it. You want good grades? Study. You want a promotion? Work harder. You want respect? Prove yourself. Everything is performance-based. So when we hear that God gives grace freely, that we don't have to earn it, pay for it, or deserve it, our minds start glitching, because nothing in this world works that way. But God is not this world. See, grace is not a paycheck. It's not a reward you get at the end of a long, perfect performance. Grace is a gift. And the thing about a gift is, it's not given because of who you are. It's given because of who the giver is. God gives grace because it's his nature. You don't have to jump through hoops or tick off religious boxes. You don't have to pretend to be okay or fake your way into holiness. Grace isn't a bonus for good behavior. It's the baseline of God's love. But so many people treat grace like a subscription service. Like, God, I prayed 5 times this week. I haven't cursed since Tuesday. I even gave up Netflix for Lent. Now, can I get some grace? And God's like, you already had it before all of that. Grace existed before you got your life together. Grace was with you when your life was falling apart. That's the point. It's not about your ability. It's about God's generosity. And until you understand that, you'll keep thinking you have to work for something that was never meant to be earned. There are people walking around thinking they're too far gone for grace, like grace is some kind of VIP lounge, and they're not on the list. But grace doesn't care about your past. It doesn't care how many times you messed up. It doesn't care about your mistakes, your detours, or your doubts. Grace meets you where you are, not where you should have been by now. Grace says, I see you, I still choose you, and I'm not going anywhere. So that's the power of it. Look at the thief on the cross. No time to change his life. No time to join a church or get baptized or volunteer or fix his reputation. He just looks over and says, remember me. And Jesus responds, today you'll be with me in paradise. That's grace. Undeserved, unexplainable, immediate. And it messes with us because we want it to be fair. But grace isn't fair. It's better than fair. Fair would be getting what we deserve. Grace is getting what we don't deserve. And that's love, mercy, and another chance. People say, but I don't feel worthy. That's the point. Grace isn't about worthiness. It's about God's choice to love you anyway. Grace doesn't ask, are you good enough? It declares, God is good enough. You don't have to come to God cleaned up and polished. You come as you are, and grace does the cleaning. Grace walks into your mess, rolls up its sleeves, and says, let's start here. We keep waiting to feel ready, waiting to be better, waiting to be worthy. But grace didn't ask for that. Grace already said yes before the apology, before the turnaround, before the breakthrough. Grace doesn't come after you change. It empowers the change. It's the starting point, not the finishing line. It's what lifts you up when you can't stand on your own. It's what keeps you when you want to quit. It's not a reward, it's a rescue. And it's always been yours.